In the early 70s, late 70s, there were not many very active women in the legal profession. And I wanted to be a lawyer by that time. So I interviewed with many firms, and many firms said, yes, why don't you come in? And the only firm that I interviewed with that had a woman in the partnership was Baker McKenzie.
Okay. But that was important to you, to be in an environment in which, to be in a firm in which you could see that there was already a woman in a position
sure,
of
but there
power.
were plenty of firms in Paris at the time who would say, you're fine, you have the perfect background, but don't ever expect to make partnership.
Right.
And you'd say, why? And they'd say, because you're a woman. Those were the days. I had a role model. It was a female partner who hired me, together with the eldest son of the founding father of the firm. When you've been brought up by excellent role models, and my mother was one, and Monique, who is the partner I was telling you about, was one as well, you just want to reciprocate.
I've talked to a couple of people at Baker just about your time there. One anecdote that I sort of jumped out to me that I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on is that we were talking at the beginning about you sort of being the first woman in the chair position, and I understand that there were some people that defaulted to calling you chairwoman, and that you officially were never called that. You were always called the chairman. And is that something, can you sort of talk a little bit about why that was important to you?
It probably comes from the French.
Right, because I know at the ministry you did something very similar,
yeah,
right? That
Madame
you
le Ministre, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
That comes from my mother. My mother was a professor specializing in Latin, Ancient Greek, and French grammar.
Okay.
So when I was appointed chairman, president, whatever you want,
right,
and later on minister, I checked with her. I said, "Well, what do you think? Do you think I should turn the name into, or turn the title into the feminine version of it?" And she said, absolutely not. This has nothing to do with the gender. It's a name. Grammar has to be respected. The rules are the rules. So therefore, don't change the name. Change the way in which management is conducted. That's fine for you, my girl. But
right.
Don't try to change names. That's just icing on the cake. The cake is more important.
What would you say to people who would see that as wanting to sort of go out of your way not to draw attention to your gender? Do you think that
well, they should pay attention to the real thing, which is what people actually do at the end of the day, not how they portray themselves.
And there are those who are, I think, looking for a change of direction from the IMF, who are critical of your appointment, and I'm sort of wondering if you have an answer to that in terms of your ability to take the IMF in this direction and make it more global.
No, proof of the pudding will be in the eating, as I said during the press conference.
Okay.
I don't think you can prejudge somebody's ability to do something until that ability has been tested.
Okay.
The rest is conjoncture, as I would say in French. I'm a free market,
right,
at the end of the day. But there are areas where you need to have regulation, where you need to have supervisors, because otherwise it leads you to excesses and abuses.
What are the concerns that need to be sort of addressed among the sort of prominent Western countries that control the IMF about this process?
Well, number one, that the world has changed, and number two, that to be legitimate and to be effective, the institution has to represent properly the world as it has changed, and that as a result they will not suffer from that restructuring and from that reform. Quite to the contrary.
Let's talk then just about bringing women up, their sort of position in the fund.
Well, women that surprised me. When I was interviewed, for instance, by the board, it was a board of 24 men.
Right.
That is a message about diversity, and it has nothing to do with the fund itself. It has to do with the people that are sent by their constituencies, and that I'm sure will change over time. The only female member of the board is Meg Lutzanger. But it's, as is often the case,
it's like you said in law.
The higher you go in the hierarchy, the fewer women there are. And
then are there things that you plan to do, to sort of actively? Is that something that you would like to actively push
I think we need to, and that's very often related to number one, maternity leave, ability for people to come back to work afterwards, ability to work from their maternity leave and be in touch with the organisation and stay in touch with the organisation. But I'm not going to change, U.S. society in and of itself, because very often when you ask female employees who manage to work their way up, they often had the support of a husband, or the support of their parents, particularly their mother, or their mother-in-law, or they live in countries where the domestic support is relatively easy and cheap.
Are there certain characteristics that powerful women share with one another that make them sort of distinctive from men at the same level?
We can laugh at ourselves. It's complicated, actually, because I'm sure that men amongst themselves do the same thing. But we tend to not overdo it in many ways. And there is an element of solidarity which is caused by the fact that we are a minority. I'll give you an example. This morning, for instance, the only female director in the room, it was a board meeting, and she called me chairman. She said, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And then she laughed, and I laughed, and I said, only you could have said that.
Could have said that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
there is, the sense of
well, here director is a neutral noun, right? So you don't have the same.
Yeah, but when the managing director presides the board,
over the board, you are the chair of the board,
Madam
right.
Chairman. That's how they call me, and she called me Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And only she could do that.
And
we just burst into laughter, both of us.
Right. No, that's a good thing. But you are keeping Madam Chairman here.
We don't take ourselves as seriously. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I would hope so.
You would hope so. Can you think of a time in your life when you have felt most powerful?
When I gave birth.
How do you deal with the pressure at the level at which you work and the high stakes that you're dealing with?
I breathe, holding my tummy, and you breathe with the top of your lungs.
Does that come from your time as an athlete, or
a little bit, yeah, and yoga practice as well.
Yeah. Do you feel that there is some connection between being sort of interdisciplinary and being influential?
Yeah. Well, I think of somebody like Bono, for instance, who is a good friend.
Right.
Bono is using his fame and his talent and his incredible singing skills to actually promote some extremely generous causes. So I have a lot of admiration, a lot of time for somebody like him.
What use, if any, do you make of social media to connect with people, or what role do you think it has in terms of leveraging influence?
Propagating the truth.
Okay. And are you active on any of these platforms, or what's your?
What do you call the social media? Facebook,
Twitter,
like
all these kinds of things. Yeah,
absolutely. I was extremely.
I see you're here with. I think this is an iPhone, right? This is okay.
Yeah. I use iPhone, iPads, and all sorts of things, but I've used Facebook and Twitter, particularly during the campaign, and as a good way to connect with my kids.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So you're friends with your kids?
Yes. I suspect them of not putting everything though on Facebook, so
because they know that you are. Because they know that you are watching. Yes, there's that whole game.